Welcome to Biblical Archaeology in 5. The ancient Egyptians were heavily influenced by their environment. They believed that the Nile was the source of life, and they witnessed things like the rising and the setting of the sun and the annual overflowing of the banks of the Nile, and these things heavily impacted their religion. And of course, they believed that there were gods associated with all of these things, and that they had a divine will that they exercised. But the Nile, that was the key to their life. And the ancients thought that the Nile, because quite honestly, they had no idea really where the source of the Nile was. So they believed that it bubbled up or sprang forth from the netherworld. They believed that the world that you and I inhabit came from this primordial mound that just came up out of the limitless water and the limitless darkness that was formless and void in the beginning. And they believed that this water came from that limitless water, and that through the netherworld upwards, and it bubbles forth into what you and I would know as the Nile. Now that's a very important thing, that idea of bubbling forth. And perhaps it might hold a key for us to understand what Moses means in chapter 2 of Genesis, when he describes Eden and says that there was a river there that flowed into the Garden of Eden to water it. And in the garden, this river turned into four: the Pishon, the Gihon, the Tigris, and the Euphrates. Tigris and Euphrates are names that we're familiar with, but Gihon and Pishon, we don't really know about those rivers. So we can't waste our time looking back to try to find the headwaters of these four rivers, and thus you'll find the Garden of Eden. That's a fool's errand. But perhaps Moses, once again, was being an apologist for Yahweh. And you know the story. Yahweh creates the world. He defeats the ancient Egyptian gods of darkness and the deep, and he's the victor. Well, now maybe Moses is portraying Yahweh as taking on another god/icon of Egyptian paganism, and that would be the Nile. Now, why might I say that? Well, ancient Hebrew scholars really did associate the Gihon with the Nile. Now, can anybody prove that? No. But think about it. The ancient Hebrew word Gihon, which is really for the river that comes out of the Garden of Eden, and there's a spring called the Gihon in Judea. That word in Hebrew, its source is this idea of bubbling forth or springing forth. Hence, they named this spring after it. But perhaps Moses used the same word for the Nile. And what he's really doing here in chapter 2 of Genesis is creating a polemic, an argument, where he is showing that Yahweh creates this river. It's not bubbling forth from some Egyptian god and goddess that are the water gods in the limitless darkness and the limitless water. It's not them. It's Yahweh who creates. And Yahweh uses this very river to water his Garden of Eden, which was a temple to his presence in the world. And so, it's probably important that the word Gihon used there by Moses corresponds with the idea that the ancient Egyptians had as to the source of the Nile, which was that it bubbled up, sprang forth from the netherworld. And so once again, Moses is a genius, and he turns their religion on its ear, showing that Yahweh is the true Creator God. There are none like Yahweh.